I'd like to thank our president for the opportunity to speak here tonight. I last spoke here on the other side in favor of U.S. global leadership this time last year. And after the speech, Ahmed came up to me and he said, "Great speech. Didn't believe a word of it, but great speech." And in that, he really epitomized what we're all about at the Oxford Union, celebrating free speech and, giving everyone a chance, and even if you vehemently disagree with their argument, respecting their right to have it. So I thank him for that. And I hope that maybe, it may be a high bar, but I hope that maybe he can believe at least a word of what I'm about to say. So I interpreted this motion a little differently than my friend Isra over there, who's rolling his eyes already. But my interpretation of the American dream is that it means something different to everyone, right? So that's absolutely fine. The whole point of the American dream is that everyone who has it is able to fulfill their potential, is able to aim and achieve whatever dream they may have as an individual. It is about individualism. There were some aspects of Isra's speech. I just came from a double tutorial on Cold War, teaching that. And so there were some aspects of Isra's speech that I could be here all night correcting. But I would just say, you identify as a citizen of the world. It really reminded me of JFK, actually, talking about being a citizen of the world. And he didn't necessarily start the Vietnam War. We don't know what he would have done. That's the fun of it, He sent in advisors to Vietnam. But yeah, I'll stop there. I'm not going to test you. So yes, I have the different idea of the motion. I have some issues with the motion, which I'm going to help explain later. But the first thing I want to say is that we are on a very different context than when the actual quote from this motion came about, right? The quote is from Martin Luther King. The American dream has become a nightmare. And he said it in 1967. And I probably don't need to tell you very much about how much of a different context we are in. In 1967, Martin Luther King Jr. faced incredible turmoil within the civil rights movement that he was attempting to maintain unity over. A year before his assassination, he was facing immense pressure to come out against the Vietnam War, which he did, to try and collaborate with people who were encouraging him to be more mindful of Black power, pay more attention to the Black Panther Party, for example. This is a very, very different context to where we are now, and even 2 years ago. In 2020, we saw the most diverse, intergenerational, interracial group of people protest after the murder of George Floyd. We saw that. We see that after this week, we see, I love the hashtag Rovember. We see how the midterms, how women's rights to choose has been protected in states as diverse as Michigan and Kentucky, a state most people thought, oh, maybe, it will be different from Kansas, which protected women's right to choose in the summer. But before I get into my issues with the motion tonight, it falls upon me to introduce the wonderful speakers in proposition. First, Isra, as I mentioned before, is our wonderful chief of staff. We've served 3 terms on Union Committee together. We're both graduate students. We're in the pit there working together. And I only wish that everyone found Isra as affable as I do. I mean, including Lord Sugar, who I think if you look on the YouTube, found Isra a little frustrating in his persistence to get his questions across. And that's what is lovable about Isra, is his persistence. I'm hoping he's got his energy out, sometimes he's a bit of a jack-in-the-box with his point of interest and point of information. But yes, I applaud him for his persistence every time. Then we have Professor Kendall Thomas, who is a professor of law, director of Center of Study, Law and Culture at Columbia, and also has research into the very timely issue of critical race theory. We then have Megan Day, a writer, editor of the Jacobin, a socialist magazine, which again proves the point of how much context has changed. If a magazine like the Jacobin had been around the decade before in the 1950s and Martin Luther King in this quote, there's no way she or others working at the magazine would have achieved the same success they have. She has also written a book entitled Bigger Than Bernie, How We Go from the Sanders Campaign to Democratic Socialism. Finally, but last but not least, we have Professor Randall Kennedy, another professor of law from the Cambridge across the pond, Harvard, and he is also on the board of the National Coalition Against Censorship. Mr. President, these are your speakers, and they are most welcome. So, my issues with this motion. When I first thought about it, I thought, this is going to be a tough sell to this particular audience. But the more I thought about it, the more I had problems with it. what are the implications of saying that the American dream has become a global nightmare? We could debate all night long whether the American dream is a myth. We could get into debates over meritocracy. Is it actually idealistic? Is it realistic? We could go on and on about that. But we cannot deny its existence. And what does it say? If you vote out that door in favor of proposition, what does it say to the people who do have that American dream? Why is it that thousands of people attempt to come to the US every single year? Well, I hope you'll indulge me here because we're very privileged at the Oxford Union to have some amazing speakers who are top of their fields. Not always do their motions that we have fit exactly with things that they're personally passionate about. But this comes from the heart, what I'm about to say, so I hope you'll indulge me. So my dream is to become a tenure professor. And I want to enter the male-dominated world of academia as one of the few handful of female presidential historians in the world. And the reason you may ask, you're at Oxford. You're doing teaching tutorials. Why would you possibly? Why would you want to go anywhere else? To be honest with you, I started teaching when I was at the University of Mississippi doing my first doctorate in US history. And I love the freedom of the American system. Yes, I'm using the word freedom. I love the freedom to be able to incorporate my own research specialism into my teaching, to share my passion with my students. I love to be able to look down an attendance register and be able to explain exactly why each student got each grade, and be able to incorporate assignments that gives each student the ability to achieve their potential. Diverse assignments, whether that's essays, papers, exams, just to be able to do that. It is a very different system than the one here in the UK, that's obviously based in Oxford and Cambridge as well. Most of the people in this room will have gone through GCSEs, A-levels. I'm old enough to have gone through AS levels. I remember a time when I was able to retake a paper if I wasn't happy with it, and the best mark go forward. Just like in the US, for SATs, for APs, you're given that chance. And education is the most fundamental way to begin your progress to what you want to attain, right? No, it's right. My turn now. See, I told you. I still like you, so it's okay. So this is the thing about the difference in education. Something that I'm sure keeps you up at night, and I hope it doesn't too much, is the fact that if you're an undergraduate here at Oxford, the weekly essays that you work on so hard, that you deliberate and blood, sweat, and tears over, they count for nothing. All that counts is one day, one exam day, and that will determine your degree, your 3 years of work. How is that fair? How is that fair? For me, that is an undue welfare burden. It's hard on mental health. And I think there could be a better system. I think the US does have a better system. Not only that, I'm speaking as a neurodiverse woman. When I was an undergraduate in the UK, I didn't get the support that I needed in order to achieve my potential. It was incredibly frustrating. When I did my year abroad in the US, I had a private cubicle devoid of any sensory distractions. I had time and a half. I was able to get the grades that I knew that I could achieve all along. And I think these are things that we can learn from the US in order to ensure that everyone is able to achieve their potential. This goes into my point about the reality of alternatives. Are we really the ones to judge right now? I mean, look at where we are. We're on the third prime minister of an entire year, and the economy is a mess. I don't know if anyone here feels good about where we are politically, economically. If you do, I'm going to say that you've already headed to the bar. I think that this is going to be, I'm not sure that we're in a position where we can really cross stones. The fact that we have such similar problems as the US. We have a shared culture. We've got shared issues. We can't be blind to this. Which leads me on to my final point. I am sure that the proposition tonight is going to make some incredibly important points, as they already have, about inequality, especially to do with race and gender. This is not confined to the US, though, and I want you to remember that the people making these points are at the top of their fields. I'm sure that they have surmounted all kinds of obstacles to get to where they are, but they are still proof that the American dream does exist. Thank you very much.